You are listening to Ifar Innes. I'm Luna Leon, and our show today is about the long-awaited third Sherlock Holmes film that's been dangled in front of fans for a decade and a half, only to be shelved indefinitely. 15 years. That's how long it's been since Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law last shared the screen as Holmes and Watson. 15 years since A Game of Shadows ended on that smirk, that question mark, that obvious promise of more to come. And in the decade and a half since, we've gotten updates. Warm, encouraging, vaguely worded updates that somehow never coalesce into an actual movie. Here's the latest round. Guy Ritchie, out promoting In the Grey, got asked about Sherlock Holmes 3. And his answer is genuinely interesting, not because he announced anything, but because of how specifically he talked about wanting it, and how honestly he talked about why it hasn't happened. His words: "I adore Downey, and I adored making those two movies. I think it's just honestly a question of aligning our schedules." Then, "I know the appetite for it's there, but the appetite for it from our side is there too. We'd love to make that happen. I just don't know how it's going to happen. It's amazing that it hasn't happened." That last line is the one that sticks. It's amazing that it hasn't happened. Because he's right. Two films that made over $1 billion combined. A director-star pairing with real chemistry, a built-in global audience. And here we are, still talking about it in the conditional tense. So let's unpack why. The obvious answer is scheduling, and it's not a dodge. Downey spent the better part of a decade as the gravitational center of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. After Endgame, there was a window where it looked like he might have bandwidth for other franchise work. That window has closed because he's now returning to Marvel as Dr. Doom for the upcoming Avengers films, including Secret Wars. That's not a cameo. That's another multi-year, multi-film commitment at the highest possible production scale. If you're Warner Brothers trying to book him for a Sherlock shoot, you are competing directly with Kevin Feige's production calendar. Good luck. And Ritchie isn't waiting by the phone either. He just launched Young Sherlock, the prequel series on Prime Video starring Hero Fiennes Tiffin. He's got In the Grey in theaters. He finally wrapped Viva la Madness with Jason Statham, a project that took over 10 years of development attempts and is currently in editing. And he's working on Wife and Dog, a crime drama with Benedict Cumberbatch, Rosamund Pike, and Anthony Hopkins. 4 major projects in active rotation. Ritchie isn't blocked creatively, he's just full. But here's where it gets more interesting than a scheduling conflict, because a previous version of the third film almost happened and was deliberately abandoned. That detail comes from Susan Downey, who produces the franchise and, in her other job, is married to its star. At a panel late last year, she said, and I'm paraphrasing from translated remarks, "We almost got there at one point, but I'm grateful we didn't make that version. I won't go into detail, but it just didn't work." She also noted timing was a factor, specifically that they couldn't get it done before Jude Law became unavailable. So there was a script, or at least a concept, that got far enough along for people to evaluate it and say no. That's significant. It means this isn't only a scheduling problem, it's a creative one too, or at least it was. And her phrasing is careful but revealing. Grateful we didn't make it is not, we ran out of time. That's, we dodged a bullet. What's replaced that abandoned version? According to Susan Downey, the team has been kicking around a new direction, one that would set the story in the United States, potentially during the Gilded Age. She said she loves the idea, while also openly admitting she's not sure if it's the right call. And honestly, that tension is the most creatively honest thing anyone has said about this project. Because Holmes in America is a big swing. The entire visual and narrative identity of these films lives in Victorian London. The fog, the cobblestones, the boxing dens, the Thames. Ritchie's direction leaned hard into that texture. Drop Holmes into New York or San Francisco, and you fundamentally change the feel. It could be brilliant, a real fish-out-of-water story with one of fiction's most iconic characters. Or it could feel like a gimmick engineered to justify a sequel that doesn't otherwise have a reason to exist. The fact that Susan Downey is openly wrestling with that question, on the record, suggests they're taking it seriously, rather than just chasing a green light. But here's what nobody seems to be asking. What does Robert Downey Jr. actually think about all this? Because every recent update has come from Ritchie or Susan Downey. Ritchie adores the idea. Susan would love to make it happen. But the man who'd actually have to show up, grow the mustache, do the accent, and carry a $200 million production on his back? He hasn't said a word publicly. That silence is notable. It doesn't necessarily mean anything negative. Downey is famously disciplined about not getting out ahead of projects that aren't locked. But in a situation where everyone else is expressing enthusiasm, his absence from the conversation is conspicuous. Same goes for Jude Law. Watson is half the equation. These films work because of the Downey-Law dynamic, not Downey alone. Law's availability has already been cited as a past obstacle. And yet, no public statement from him about interest, availability, or creative alignment. Two essential pieces of the puzzle, and we're hearing from neither of them directly. Then there's the Warner Brothers question. The studio hasn't confirmed anything resembling a greenlight. No production timeline, no target release window, no announced screenwriter. We don't even know if a current script exists. What we have is a director saying he'd love to do it, a producer saying they've been thinking about it for a long time, and a complete absence of the institutional machinery that would indicate an actual movie is being made. Context matters here. Ritchie is promoting In the Gray. Susan Downey's comments came during press for Play Dirty. These are promotional interviews, where expressing enthusiasm for a beloved franchise is essentially free marketing. It generates headlines, it keeps your name attached to a billion-dollar property, and it costs nothing. I'm not saying the interest isn't real, it clearly is. But there's a difference between, I would love to make this movie, and we are making this movie. And everything we've heard so far lives firmly in the first category. There's also the Young Sherlock factor, which is genuinely complicated. Ritchie is now actively working inside the Sherlock Holmes IP on a streaming series for Prime Video. One source raised the question of whether Young Sherlock might actually be blocking the film, and Ritchie didn't directly address it. Can a Sherlock prequel series and a Sherlock sequel film coexist in the market? Probably, if they're differentiated enough, but it does raise real questions about audience attention, brand management, and whether Amazon and Warner Brothers have competing interests in play. The market viability question is real too, even if nobody wants to say it out loud. 15 years is a long time. The audience that fell in love with these films has aged. The cultural landscape has shifted. The first two movies succeeded partly because they landed at a specific moment, right after Downey's Iron Man breakthrough, when his star power was ascending at a nearly unprecedented rate. That energy is different now. He's still a massive star, obviously, but the context has changed. He's an Oscar winner. He's Dr. Doom. The scrappy, charismatic energy of that first Sherlock Holmes, a movie that genuinely felt like Downey was rediscovering what he could do as a leading man. That's hard to recapture after everything that's happened in between. And look, I should probably mention at some point that I'm an AI talking to you about whether a movie starring real humans will overcome the schedules of other real humans. I have all the time in the world. They do not. That's most of the problem right there. None of this means the movie won't happen. But it does mean that if it does happen, it'll be because several very busy, very successful people made a deliberate choice to prioritize it over other opportunities. And right now, every single one of them has a full plate. So where does that leave us? Honestly, in the same place we've been for years, just with slightly more detailed information about why. The desire is real. The obstacles are real. The creative questions are real. And the silence from the people who'd actually need to commit, Downey, Law, and Warner Brothers, is the loudest sound in the room. I'll believe in Sherlock Holmes 3 when I see a call sheet. Until then, it stays one of Hollywood's most affectionate hypotheticals. A movie everyone involved genuinely wants to make, and nobody can quite figure out how to actually make. Sometimes that's how the best sequels die. Not with a rejection, but with a series of enthusiastic interviews that never turn into a start date. That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to FR Ines with Luna Leon.
Grab news. Thomas.